Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Athletic Longevity Podcast, which brings you fresh energy and inspiration. I'm Mikhail, and I'm your guide to the world of people who refuse to accept age and life's obstacles as factors that decide how long and how well they will perform in sports and in movement. Quite the contrary, they use their experience in order to stay at the top. Whatever that imaginary top is, we each decide it about ourselves. My guest today is David Wilson, a movement coach, anti-ageism advocate, and speaker, known on social media as Old School Moves. That's how I met David on Instagram. David, hello. Welcome to Athletic Longevity Show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm quite excited to be here.
Absolutely. Me too. I'm really thrilled to welcome you to the show. I've been following you on Instagram for a couple of months, maybe half a year, maybe longer, and I really enjoy to watch your videos and your exercises. What I find fascinating is that I've been following a lot of different people on Instagram that actually perform some kind of movements and movement education. And I see that all of them, they have their own style, their own level of difficulty, and I find your own, let's say, universe that you've created for yourself very unique in the way how you express yourself through movement. So I wanted to ask you, what actually is your style in movement and movement education? Can you somehow describe that?
Whoa, what a fantastic question. My style is curiosity. So I don't really have a specific style. I'm certainly influenced by a number of different things. But my style is to be led by awareness of my own body, a sense of what my body is telling me it needs, that it likes, how it itself is curious to move. And what I do on a particular day is obviously influenced by principles of strength and an understanding of what is important for our bodies, especially as we're growing older. But it is also driven by a sense of awareness and curiosity about what I would like to do, about what I find interesting on a particular day, about what an appropriate level of challenge is for me, and about how I would like to nourish my body on a particular day. So I don't adhere to any one particular style. I'm deeply influenced by my own personal trainer and mentor, husband and wife team out of Toronto, who run the studio known as Spirit Loft. So that would be Andre Talbot and Catalina Moraga. I'm also quite influenced by Josef Frucek and Linda Capitanea of Fighting Monkey. And I like their very diverse approach. So if I am to look at how my approach is informed, I would say it's looking at variety, because what I'm most curious about is how my body can move. So if I limit myself to one particular style or one particular modality, I'm limiting my own curiosity about all of the ways that my body can move, and limiting it to just some of those ways. So there's nothing wrong in my mind with becoming an expert or very well informed about one particular style. But in everything that I've done in my life, I've always characterized myself as a generalist, because I find that far more interesting. I find variety far more interesting than specialization.
All right, very nice. Actually, when I founded Athletic Longevity, initially my idea was to meet with athletes and to somehow provide inspiration and as well tips and some kind of advice to professional and non-professional amateur sportsmen, by people who have what to share, people who perform on a high level till, let's say, later age than it's usual. And then with the time, I've been running the podcast for 2 years, I started realizing that it is not at all about performance, that it's actually about enjoying movement as such and enjoying life through movement. So keeping in touch and getting in touch with some kind of an inner joy, which is brought to me, by having my body move in different ways. And maybe that's partially why I really was excited to find your page on Instagram, because that's what I've been getting from you as well. So what is the connection between movement and joy of life for yourself?
Well, movement is life, and life is movement. So we learn about life through how we move through the world, not necessarily through movement that we would characterize as exercise, but how we learn, how we grow as human beings, how we even learn who we are as human beings is characterized by how we move through the world. And I think how I approach movement in my fitness practice is going to inform how I approach life. So I like to approach things with curiosity and with compassion toward myself and with playfulness. So I labored for a good part of my life under the very cruel master of perfectionism. So with perfectionism, you become so attached to an idea of who you are, you become so attached to an image of what you should be, that it actually discourages joy and it discourages experimentation, because you're always comparing yourself around what you think you should be. You're always comparing yourself to others. And that's, for me, was not a very healthy way to be in the world. It robbed me of opportunity. It robbed me of joy. It robbed me of meaningful connection with others because of the envy that I would be experiencing as I compared myself to them. And so one of the fantastic gifts of growing into my late 40s and 50s is learning to let go of that perfectionism and replacing it with curiosity. So when I'm informed by curiosity as I move through the world, it's asking this what if question. And success is not defined so much by being able to do X, Y, or Z, as much as it is by what am I noticing here? What's new? What's interesting? But of course, that has to be tempered with some self-compassion as well, because there's always this desire, I think, to make a particular shape or reach for this specific goal. So finding ways to be compassionate, which sometimes does not mean taking it easy on yourself. Being compassionate can also mean pushing yourself in certain ways, but being mindful that those ways are creating healthy ways of thinking, healthy ways of being aware and moving through the world, rather than things that are more self-destructive. And of course, playfulness, bringing this attitude of, yeah, it matters what I'm doing, but ultimately it doesn't matter that much. That adds a certain levity to what I'm doing as well. So if I look at playfulness as simply a way of keeping the game going, where it isn't about winning or losing a game, but continuing to play the game and finding ways to play the game no matter what my body is feeling on a particular day, or no matter how my body might age, I think that that is really the great gift of the way that I have learned to practice over the last 8 to 10 years.
Absolutely fantastic, because I can very much resonate with what you share. I read on your webpage that you've started your journey with fitness and movement in your mid-30s or something around that.
Oh, much later than that.
Much later?
Much later than
Okay.
that.
Okay.
So it's not that I was entirely sedentary, but for the vast majority of my professional career, I was a high school English teacher and creative writing teacher. So I was not predisposed to be particularly athletic. It's not that I didn't enjoy moving around, but I was never the guy to be picked first for sports teams. And in fact, I didn't really play many sports when I was in high school, and certainly none at all when I was in university. It's not that I was inactive, but I would, sign up for a gym membership, and like many people, go to the gym for 6 months and then give it up. And, I bought myself a bicycle, and I would, tootle around on my bicycle for a bit and try to keep myself fit that way. And then after a while, I'd give that up as well. So it was a question of kind of picking things up and putting things down, being somewhat aware that I needed to do something to keep my body somewhat engaged. But I wouldn't really call what I was doing terribly intentional. It was more like, oh yeah, I should get out and move around a bit today. Okay, let's try this. So in my late 40s, I actually became interested in a martial art, soft martial art known as Aikido, which I practiced again in my rather sort of half-hearted way. I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it more for rolling around on the floor than for the actual martial aspect of it. So I don't know if you're familiar with Aikido, but it involves a lot of throwing and blending. And I loved being thrown, and I loved rolling around on the floor. And the other parts of it were okay. And I advanced, and I got to the point of black belt and all of that, but very, very badly, and very slowly in comparison with some of the people who started at the same time as me. But I really enjoyed it for the social aspect, and I think that's why I stuck with it for I think a good 6 or 7 years. And then I started getting the message from my sensei and from a few other people at the dojo who at that time I would have characterized as my friends, that I was getting too old. And
Really?
that I was getting too old. And at this point, I would have been in my 50s. Well, nobody really wants to stick around where they're not wanted. And so I left. And I didn't know what to do with myself. And it so happens that I had many years previously purchased a kettlebell, which was gathering rust and dust in my basement. So I figured, okay, well, I picked up this kettlebell. I played with it for a while, didn't really learn how to use it. So maybe I should take some classes. So I took some classes, and completely by accident. So this was one of these happy moments of, I don't know if you believe or fate or in fate or destiny or whatever, where it just so happened that I landed in the right place completely by accident. So a studio that wasn't focused really on kettlebells offered one kettlebell class.
All right.
And that's where I ended up. And I'd also looked around some other places, and the quality of instruction and what I was being invited to think about while I was learning how to use the kettlebell in this particular studio really attracted me. And so I said, well, what other do you offer other kettlebell classes other than this once a week? And the answer, of course, was no, but we do offer these other movement practices. Why don't you try them out? And that was the beginning of who I have become now. And that would have happened in my mid 50s. It would have happened around the time when I was about 50, 55 years old.
Okay. Quite interesting story, I mean, actually, that's what athletic longevity is all about. It is about rediscovering your ability to move in an age which, by society, it's kind of accepted as age when we should be stopping to move, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I'm getting 50 this year. So basically, partially my journey with athletic longevity has been marked by that as well. And actually, the transition of athletic longevity from being like sports podcast into being a movement and joy of life podcast has to do with my vision that I created for my 50s. I have a friend of mine who is kind of a life coach, and we worked on that together. And he told me, okay, let's create a vision for Michael 5.0. And we started working on that. And basically the vision is all about actually rediscovering myself, and rediscovering the way how I move and how I enjoy movement. And now I'm as well like mixing different styles of sports. I've done a lot of sports throughout my life. I've done 6 years of Aikido, so I can resonate to the Aikido. It's a lovely movement activity. I really like it. And yeah, just getting to believe and sticking to the society perception that I'm getting 50 and I should be stopping, with what I've been doing till now. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And yeah, and basically I'm touching here on the question of ageism, which you actually are focusing on as well, and you're lecturing on that in that area as well, on that topic. And I've seen a lot of very nicely described posts on your Instagram on that topic. What is your overall opinion about ageism and how it works in society?
Oh, well, first of all, I have to respond to what you just said. So congratulations on finding a way to move into aging that is not resisting it. So successful aging is not about hanging on for dear life to what we had. It's about finding ways to be in the world with what we have now. All stages of life, all stages in life are characterized by both opportunities and by letting go. So the man that you are now is not the man that you were when you were 18, not the man that you were when you were 25, 35, even 45. So being able to let go of that man who is still part of you, but also seeing opportunities in the man that you are now, I think is what characterizes successful aging. So being grateful for what we have, looking at what we have as opportunities for possibility and discovery, rather than mourning and being sad over what is no longer. And I think that this gets to the very core of ageism. So we grow up swimming in a sea of ageism that begins right when we are children with some of the images we see of older people in the books that are read to us. The idea of the wicked old witch, the little old man who is grumpy and angry all the time. These are stereotypes that are placed upon us as children and then get reinforced, certainly in North American culture, with a very destructive cult of youth that suggests that really the only period of our life that really has any great value is from our 20s to our 30s. So I have encountered people who are terrified of the number 30 as they approach that age. And what a cruel, cruel culture to live in, where really we only have 10 good years of life. Well, how ridiculous is that? So we all have this sea of ageism within which we swim, and it gets internalized. So we grow fearful of myths around aging that are truly myths. So one of the great myths that we grow fearful of is the myth of frailty. Well, yes, many people can grow frail as they get older or become less capable as they grow older. But this is, in fact, one of the modifiable factors that many of us can actually address by becoming less sedentary, by inviting more movement into our lives. So many of the things that we ascribe to age are incorrectly ascribed to aging. They are, in fact, more a function of a lack of activity or a lack of variety of activity. So, for example, no shade on running, but if all I ever do for physical activity is run, I'm going to get really good at running, but I'm not necessarily going to be developing much upper body strength. Depending on the type of running I do, I might not be developing agility or balance in certain ways. So being interested in all of those things, I think, is really, really important. It's very interesting that our attitudes around aging are going to determine to a quite a significant degree how we age. So, for example, it has been shown through blue chip studies, so very, very reliable studies, that people who have positive attitudes toward aging can live up to 7.5 years longer than people who have negative attitudes toward aging. And if you stop and think about it, that only makes sense. So, for example, if I have a positive attitude toward aging, if I think that it's possible for me to stay healthy and interested and engaged in the world, then when, for example, something happens to my body, I might go to the doctor and say, hey, can you look at this? As opposed to saying, oh, it's just that I'm growing older. I have heard people talk about physical aches and pains in their 30s, where they are saying, oh, it's my knee, it's that I'm growing older. And they're not necessarily looking at doing anything about that. So, of course, as they grow even older and now begin to not move around so much, that's only going to get worse. But if I believe that I am not destined to life sitting on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through television channels as I age, then I might stay more active. I might take care of myself a little bit more. And this isn't to say that we can't lead meaningful and very fulfilling lives in all sorts of ways. But having positive attitudes, or actually not positive, but more accurate attitudes toward aging, can really influence how we age, can influence our memory. If I expect to lose my memory as I grow older, I am in fact far more likely to do so. A phenomenon well documented by a United States researcher known as Becca Levy, who I believe works out of Yale. This is known as stereotype embodiment, and she has done tons of studies, and other people have confirmed those studies around the world, that we become the stereotypes that we believe in.
Well, that's, yeah, go on.
So this, every time I share this, this absolutely floors me. So one of the things that we're scared of as we grow older is dementia. Well, first of all, according to the World Health Organization, only about 8% of us will experience dementia, which leaves 92% of us who will not experience dementia. 20% of us will remain very cognitively sharp right up until the last days and hours of our lives. Most of us will not end up in nursing homes or long-term care facilities. So, but to the statistic that I was about to tell you, even if I am genetically predisposed to dementia, to Alzheimer's specifically, even if I am genetically predisposed to Alzheimer's, I have the gene marker that suggests that I am at greater risk. If I have more accurate views around aging, that reduces my risk of developing Alzheimer's by close to 50%. 50, not 15, 50%. And this is simply by having more accurate views around aging. Incredible, right?
Well, you touched upon so many points, which are as well, for me, so fascinating. I like the lack of movement, beliefs that we grow up with, social conditioning that we grow up in, the hidden potential of genes, but not being victim to our genes. Our ability to influence our potential, and the ability of the environment to influence that potential. Just yesterday, I started watching a very interesting series. It's a series from 2016. It's called The Brain. I think it's an American series, but they were on BBC. And yeah, it's fascinating actually to see how scientifically proven it is. I watched the first episode yesterday, that we perceive a lot with our eyes, and a lot of information gets into our brain through our eyes. but this information is confronted with already stored information in our brain, which creates the actual picture that we see, which is amazing. So at the end of the day, scientifically, it proves that really the reality that we live in is created in our minds. And in whatever way, you know, people can accept that. Because when you say that just in a philosophical way, you know, somebody would accept it, somebody would say this is bullshit, you know. But when you see that the brain works actually in a way that it brings the data from outside and the data from inside, and that's what it creates as a reality that you live in. It's amazing. So I totally believe as well that with the genes, there is certain potential of the genes, but yeah, you can influence it with the way how you think, how you behave, what you eat, where you live, what people you meet, and so on. But David,
Yes, and I
yeah,
would agree with you certainly that genetics play a part, but also socio-cultural and economic. So some of these things that are modifiable by the individual, but just as importantly, we need to look at exerting influence on our culture so that people can have the opportunities to thrive. So when we live, for example, in a deeply ageist culture, that even just in the language that we and the associations that we have with the word young as opposed to the word old, we are creating in some ways a very restricted culture around acceptable ways or what is expected as we grow older. So if you do a quick image search of older people or elderly or seniors, you know, on whatever browser you like to use, you're going to get a very interesting idea of what it means to be old. And even when we just look at our language around old, so I can use the word young, and when I use the word young, people hear all sorts of really positive things like energetic, things like sexy, attractive, interesting, engaged, sharp-minded, all of those things. And yet, all of those things are equally possible for us as we age. So you look at the word old, and when we use the word old, we use it negatively. So we use old when we say, oh, I'm feeling my age today, or I'm feeling old today. Well, what does that mean? It means I'm feeling tired. But that's not necessarily because of my age. I could feel tired when I was young. I could feel exhausted when I was young. I could feel disengaged and disinterested in the world when I was young. So one of the things that I really push back against is this use of the word old to mean something other than just having lived for longer than some other people. That's all that the word old means, and that's all that the word old should mean. We have to, as a culture, begin to let go of this idea of old as a negative thing and instead see it as the tremendous, tremendous privilege that it is. Not everybody in the world has the opportunity to grow old. And I'd like to just emphasize for a moment, we call it grow old, grow old. So let's actually maybe begin to embrace that idea and the opportunities and the privileges that we have as we're growing older. So things that I hear all the time, people who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s or beyond, being described as, let's take my own age. Somebody described me recently as 63 years young. And I stopped them right there and said, no, I am 63 years old. When you say that I am 63 years young, you are not letting me age. You are saying that there was only one acceptable time of my life, and that was when I was in my 20s, maybe my early 30s, and I refuse to accept that. I have grown so much since I was a man in my 20s, since I was a man in my 30s, since I was in my 40s and beyond. So please, please let me grow old. Don't insist that I try impossibly to stay young when I'm in my 60s, when I'm in my 70s, when I'm in my 80s. Let me instead embrace the opportunities that those stages of life offer.
Very nicely said. Very nicely said. And that this was one of the topics that I really liked in some of your posts not that long ago, where you talked about that specifically about accepting that you are old, but accepting it with everything positive that it brings, basically, and not just basing the word old on all the kind of society preconcepts around that. What is the way, because you have obviously people that that you teach and that you consult with their own, let's say, movement practice, but as far as I understand as well, their own perception of aging. What are the techniques, the methodologies you use in order to, let's say, bring people out of their patterns and behavioral and thinking patterns in order to accept themselves as they are in a positive way?
I think to help people start where they are. So especially for people who haven't moved for a while, maybe even really been engaged in a movement practice ever, simply being invited to discover what their bodies can do before we move too quickly toward what they can't do yet. So many people will come in their 50s and 60s with already a sense of loss, of burden, of fear. And so beginning to invite them to see what they can do. Because if people haven't moved their bodies for a while, they can really surprise themselves by things that they thought they couldn't do, but in fact, without any training at all, are quite possible. The other thing that I really work on in early days, and in fact, always with the people that I work with, and including myself, is being aware of the stories that I'm telling myself while I'm moving. So I have one hard and fast rule for myself, and one only, and it's the only hard and fast rule that I have for my clients. And we work together for them to figure out how to apply that rule to their movement practice in their lives. And that rule is: move today in a way that makes you eager, excited, and capable of moving again tomorrow. So I'm sure that we all know somebody who has decided to embark on a new exercise or movement regimen, has been really excited about it for the first few months, and has really embraced that idea of no pain, no gain. And they stick with it for maybe 3-4 months, but after a while, the no pain, no gain mentality catches up to you. And your body, out of self-preservation, will begin to say, nah, I don't really feel like doing this today. I'm not going to do it today. And then one day leads to 2, leads to 3, leads to 4, leads to a month, so on and so forth. And then we lose that habit. So when I'm working with my clients, I talk to them about how we're moving together today so that you want to move again tomorrow, whether that's with me or whether that is without me. So ideally, in fact, you and I are going to work together for some time while you feel that you need me. But then at some point, you're going to want to make the choice to move on your own. And that can be, I hope that you want to continue to do that with me. But my goal is actually that you're still going to want to do that without me. So working with them to find that appropriate level, and always be aware of how their bodies are feeling on a particular day, finding an appropriate level of challenge, while also finding an appropriate level of nurture. And it's going to be different from one day to the next. finding an appropriate level of newness or novelty, but also balancing that with familiarity and getting to work on something so that you really feel that you are becoming more confident and more competent. Also, challenging yourself to a degree that you're actually going to see benefit and change rather than just practicing what you can already do. So it's a question of developing a mindset that is saying, okay, I want to practice today in a way that is interesting enough to me, is so engaging that I want to come back and practice again tomorrow, that I want to keep doing this. Because movement is not movement for now, it's movement for life. And I can keep moving no matter what happens to me as I age. I can't predict what is going to happen to me. No matter how hard I try, no matter how much I take care of myself, things can happen to me that could be, quite unforeseen and have a significant impact on how I can move through the world. But I can still move. And I can still be interested in how to find interest and engagement in the capacity that I have in my body, and to be curious about whether I could develop capacity in a different way.
So it's all about staying curious. And so about the kind of, staying curious, staying open, not being afraid to go out of your little circle that you live in, open up to the new.
It's partly that. I would say it's largely that.
Mm-hmm.
But it can't always be new, because if I'm always doing something new, then there's that part of me that really hungers for progress and that can really be nourished by the development of a skill. So, and yes, there is curiosity associated with skill development as well. But I think I do want to push back against the idea around it always having to be new. It doesn't always have to be new. I can bring curiosity to something that is old or older or more familiar as well. So it's a question of, what do I need in order to want to do this again? And that answer is going to be different for different people. Some people are going to need more novelty in their practice. Other people are going to need more familiarity in their practice, and especially in the early stages, a sense that their practice is making a difference. So building strength, maybe consciously building strength, intentionally working on building strength, intentionally working on building balance and stamina in the early stages, where people are getting a sense of, oh yeah, this is making a difference, and I kind of feel better about myself and I like it. So it's never one thing or another. It's always being aware of, in order for me to move forward and want to do this again, what am I craving? What do I need? What do I want? What is going to nourish and nurture me? Sometimes by adding challenge and novelty, sometimes by maybe making things a little bit easier so that I can focus on maybe one thing in particular that I might be struggling with. So it's this constant developing of awareness that I would think is what characterizes my coaching more than anything else. So it's the people I'm working with talking about their experience, and us being able to build something together that is working from their experience, not centering me as a coach, but centering them as learners and movers.
Yeah, you said awareness, and what came to my mind is self-awareness, basically being aware of yourself, getting in touch with yourself. So for me, that's exactly how movement has been serving me. I mentioned about getting in touch with my inner source of joy, And at the end of the day, it is getting in touch with my real self, with being aware who I am, what I need, as opposed to what I should do because somebody is expecting this from me. Because that's how we've been grown up, and we have been learned to behave all the time, to serve to the needs and expectations of people around us, up to the point that actually we forget about our own needs. And of course, it's normal that we all, or many of us, go through stages where we are, of course, parents. We take care of our parents when they get older. So, of course, it's fine to focus on as well, and we need to focus at times on the needs of other people around us. But yeah, we get to a moment when we forget about ourselves. So for me, it is about really movement has come to a point when it is a way of getting in touch with myself, self-expressing myself, and finding somehow, my own authenticity, and that's why I feel so much fulfilled when I'm able really to express myself through movement than through anything else. But what I find as well is that actually people have it differently in their lives, when it comes to how do they express themselves. So I know people around me who would be reaching this state of mind and being through other activities. They could be playing piano, they could be drawing, painting, and so on. So there are different ways of self-expression, but the end result is, basically giving a space for your own needs to be expressed and fulfilled.
I think that what you have just said is incredibly beautiful. And in fact, when you use the word authenticity, that was the word that I had in my head around what you were talking about. And from my own experience, I found that when I learned to love myself, when I learned to be more compassionate toward myself, when I learned to take care of my own needs and actually come to an understanding of what those needs were, because I was so divorced from that for so long that I didn't even know what my needs were for a good probably 20 years of my life. When I became more in tune with those things, when I grew into my more authentic self, I was able to then become more loving, more compassionate toward other people, and to learn how to give them space and create the conditions also for them to become their authentic selves. So I think that there is great truth in the idea that if I am to love other people, I need to learn to love myself first. If I am going to learn to treat other people well and give other people the grace and space to be who they can be in the world, I need to learn how to do that for myself first.
Absolutely. It's interesting that there are so many expressions which actually can be at first taken as a cliche, because we use them around here and there so many times, but there is so much truth in it, like what you just said. In order to love others, I need to first love myself. And if people don't sit and don't think around behind, or actually in depth, of that thought, of that expression, and if they don't have, they need to have the actual experience themselves,
well, I mean,
in order to understand it.
How I think about myself creates a habit of mind. So if we take habits of movement, it really is about creating, what I try to do with my clients is create a habit for life of movement and the mindset that goes with it, because you can't have one without the other. But we look at how we talk to ourselves is a habit. So if I have, let's go back to sad perfectionist me from 20, 30 years ago, the habit of mind was judgmental, always judgmental. So of course, what habit of mind did I bring to other people, even when I was trying to be kind? Because I had nurtured the habit of judgment. What kinds of habits did I bring to everything that I did? judgment, rather than all of the other things that I could bring, like curiosity, like love, like compassion. So I need to very much work on the habit of mind in order to become the person that I want to be in the world. The person that I want to be in the world is going to be characterized by how I think about myself, and therefore how I think about other people.
David, what are your sources of inspiration for yourself? I mean, I understand what already the inspiration that you give to others, that you educate. Where do you take your inspiration, your knowledge that moves you ahead and helps you to keep reinventing yourself?
I take my inspiration from all over. So I think I've already mentioned a couple of my deep influences. So my own mentors, Andre Talbot and Catalina Moraga, I take tremendous inspiration from them. And one of the reasons that I'm very much inspired by them is that they are always learning and refining and being interested in growing. And generally, it's those people that I'm interested in. So for the same reason, I'm interested in fighting monkey practice, because Linda and Joseph are very curious about not just taking the systems that they are creating and formalizing them. They're always looking outward. They're always looking at other things. I'm very inspired by poetry. I am very enamored of the American poet Mary Oliver, because of how present. Unfortunately, she died just recently, a couple of years ago now, maybe, but she was very, very present in the world and was paying attention to the world that she was in right now, rather than always grasping toward something in the future or reminiscing over something from the past. It wasn't that those other two frames of time didn't influence her, but she was always very, very, very much in the present. I find it, in fact, difficult not to be inspired by something. So my partner is a great reader. She reads probably, I think last year she read something close to like 300 books.
Oh
Just
my God,
a fantastic
amazing.
reader. So sometimes she'll be reading something and I'll pick it up and I'll just look at it. Well, I was quite surprised to pick up a book by the American writer Elizabeth Gilbert the other day, and I hadn't expected to find anything in that book that interested me, which was really strange, because it was a book on creativity. But I'm thinking, okay, Elizabeth Gilbert, you wrote Eat, Pray, Love. Yeah, I'm bringing certain biases, gender biases around this. Am I going to be interested in this book at all? But I said to myself, well, David, if you're curious, if you're going to characterize yourself as being a curious and interested human being, you have to be curious and interested about everything. And so I picked up this book, and I said to my partner, can I have this book? Because she gives books away because she acquires so many of them. I said, can I have this book? This is a really fantastic book. And I'm underlining so many things. So it's difficult for me not to be inspired by something. There's almost always something that resonates with me, that makes me consider thinking about something a little bit differently. And I think that it's largely just a question of being aware of when I'm about to reject something out of hand without even trying it, like I was about to do with Elizabeth Gilbert. And instead say, well, hey, wait a minute. Why are you doing this? Maybe you can confront your own biases here, and let's give something a chance. So it's very interesting when I give people a chance, when I give books a chance, when I give things that I'm not at all familiar with and maybe a little bit scared by because I'm not knowledgeable or competent in that way, when I give them a chance, more often than not, I'm quite inspired by them.
Yeah, as they say, pick up a thing you are afraid of each day and go do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very nice.
Yeah,
Um,
which takes me immediately to Alice in Wonderland, and where the goal was to do seven impossible things before breakfast, which I love. Like seven impossible things before breakfast. How great a way to begin to move through life, to confront something that you think that isn't possible, and even before breakfast, taking a look at, how can I move toward this today?
Lovely, lovely. Actually, it's 2023. I work a little bit with numerology. I have people around me who work with numerology as well, and I get some kind of insights. It's a seventh year, obviously, because it's 2 plus 2 plus 3, and seven is very much about actually new action, getting into the new, and yeah. I mean, so do seven new things before before breakfast is just a very nice thing that belongs to this year.
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
I'm glad that I could share that.
yeah, thank you. David, what are your plans ahead? I've seen that you had a, if I'm not wrong, actually, when I found your Instagram account, you had a couple of thousand followers. Now I noticed that you have 100,000 followers. So I see there is a big surge, you know. That's very great. So congratulations to that. What are your plans? Do you plan any online courses ahead, or what are your plans basically ahead with your movement practice?
I do already teach an online course called Move Well, Age Strong. Uh, so certainly continuing with that, that is something that is, very, very near and dear to my heart. Um, in addition to that, expanding some of my work around pro-aging advocacy, ending ageism, and offering people both learning and moving opportunities to confront our own internalized ageism, because we all have it. Just the other day, I went and had coffee with a lovely, lovely, lovely woman who was fairly, new in my social circle, and I learned her age, which was 50. And immediately in my little mind, I'm thinking, oh, you look really good for your age. Well, what an ageist comment is that, right? So here I am, an anti-ageism advocate. And everybody does labors under these ageist attitudes and beliefs. So I just had an interesting moment of laughing at myself, saying, yes, there's lots of work to be done for everybody on internalized ageism. So to get to your question around future plans, certainly increasing some of the things that I'm saying and doing and offering, both in terms of movement and learning around internalized ageism, beginning to confront it and dismantle it. Because when we can begin to confront and dismantle it in ourselves, we recognize that it's all around us, and it gives us greater power to begin to confront so many of the things that are out there around pressures, for example, especially from the beauty and, ironically, the fitness industries, to quote unquote stay young, always be anti-aging. Well, if I'm anti-aging, that actually means I'm pro-death. So no, thank you very much. So that's where I'm going. I'm giving a talk associated with some people near and dear to my heart, the Back to Roots internship, co-founded and co-created by Luke Davies and Samantha Emanuel. We're looking at doing an anti-ageism offering that might even be free to the public. So stay tuned to my Instagram for more information around that. And I have a couple of secret plans and projects for the spring and summer, again, around bringing the idea of pro-aging and movement together in interesting ways, maybe even calling on my previous experience as a teacher of creativity, creative writing in particular, to kind of bring a creative movement experience around ideas of aging together. So lots of ideas. And of course, I'll speak whenever anybody wants me to speak, and I'll move with anybody who wants to move with me. So, because I love moving with people and I always learn something from moving with them. So it's all
Lovely,
good.
lovely, lovely. Very nice to have you on the podcast, David. I feel really enriched, and that's always a sign that, yeah, I mean, we've been having a good connection, and I've been getting a lot of inspiration from what you said. So thank you very much for being on Athletic Longevity.
It has been such a pleasure. Like, I've had such a great conversation with you, and listening to you talk about becoming Mikhail 5.0 and becoming more authentic and growing into who you are now. It's such an inspiration to me. I'm going to take that into my day as well. So thank you so much for sharing that piece of your life.
Thank you, David. Thank you everyone for watching. We've been having David Wilson on Athletic Longevity. David, good luck with everything ahead, and with your plans and with your secret plans as well. I'm really looking forward to get to know them once you reveal them on your Instagram, I hope. And by the way, mid of March, I'm going to a fighting monkey practice here in Prague. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Nice.
And I'll definitely share with you how it went after that.
I can't wait to hear about it.
Thank you again. Have a good day and speak soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, one more time. You will find the podcast, and actually you're watching it right now. So you found it already on YouTube, on my Instagram, Athletic Longevity, which is actually the original Czech podcast, which now I'm as well extending to English language. So if you like this interview we had with David Wilson, please do share on your networks, and definitely subscribe for my channels to be able to get to know more interesting guests actually, that will be coming to my show. Thank you very much and have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.